The air at the annual Beaumont Foundation Gala was thick with the scent of money and magnolias. At its glittering center stood Robert Beaumont, the charismatic heir to a corporate empire, his smile as polished as his $1,000 shoes. On his arm was Penelope Reed, a woman whose beauty was as sharp and brilliant as the constellation of diamonds around her neck, a gift, the whispers said, from Robert himself. Everyone who mattered was there, celebrating Beaumont prestige. But the most pointed whispers weren't just about the brazen affair. They were about the woman who wasn't there, his wife, Catherine, 8 months pregnant, and conveniently tucked away at home, supposedly for her own well-being. But Catherine Beaumont was not at home. She was several thousand feet in the air, about to make an entrance that would not just steal the show, but burn the entire stage to the ground. The Beaumont penthouse was less a home and more a museum of modern minimalism, spanning the top 2 floors of a skyscraper that scraped the clouds over the city. Its floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of a world that seemed to belong to them. For Catherine Beaumont, however, the view had begun to feel like the decorated walls of a very expensive prison. Her marriage to Robert had in the beginning been a whirlwind of passion and promise. He was the dynamic, ambitious successor to Beaumont Industries, a global logistics conglomerate. She was a brilliant but unassuming software architect, with a quiet fortune from a patent she'd sold in her early 20s, a fact she'd downplayed, preferring to be seen for her mind rather than her bank account. Robert had been charmed by her intellect, a refreshing change, he'd said, from the vapid socialites he usually encountered. For the first 2 years, it was idyllic. He championed her intelligence, she grounded his ambition. They were the city's power couple, a perfect blend of old money and new brilliance. But somewhere in the 3rd year, the foundation began to crack. Robert's business trips grew longer, his explanations vaguer. The passion that had once defined their nights was replaced by the cool, sterile silk of their bedsheets and the soft glow of his phone, which he now guarded like a state secret. When Catherine discovered she was pregnant, she had hoped it would be the tether that would pull him back to her, back to them. For a few weeks it worked. He was attentive, rubbing her tired feet, bringing her cravings at midnight, speaking in hushed, excited tones about their future son. But the glow faded as quickly as it had appeared. The late nights at the office returned, followed by weekends away for urgent board meetings in cities that were always sunny and exclusive. Catherine wasn't naive. She was an analyst by nature, a woman who saw patterns in code and in life. The pattern of Robert's behavior was a simple, brutal algorithm of deceit, the scent of an unfamiliar, expensive perfume clinging to his suit jacket. The credit card statements with charges from jewelry stores she'd never entered and restaurants she'd never been to. The way his eyes would glaze over when she spoke of baby names, his mind clearly miles away. She felt the cold dread of truth coiling in her gut, but the hope of a mother-to-be was a stubborn thing. She wanted to be wrong. For the sake of the child kicking gently beneath her heart, she prayed she was just an insecure, hormonal pregnant woman. This evening was a prime example. The Beaumont Foundation Gala was the social event of the year, a night Robert had always insisted she be by his side for the perfect hostess and brilliant wife. This year, however, he had been firm. "You need to rest, darling," he had said that morning, his voice a practiced symphony of concern. He'd smoothed a hand over her swollen belly, his touch feeling more like a gesture for an audience than a moment of genuine affection. "All that noise, the stress, it's not good for the baby. Everyone will understand." She knew the real reason. He didn't want the visual of his heavily pregnant wife standing next to him. It was an inconvenient truth, a symbol of a domesticity he was actively escaping. He wanted to be seen as he saw himself, a vital, powerful man, untethered and desired. A pregnant wife didn't fit that narrative. "Of course, Robert," she had replied, her voice even. "You're right. The baby and I will have a quiet night in." He kissed her forehead, a perfunctory gesture, and left his expensive cologne lingering in the air like a taunt. She watched from the window as his sleek black car pulled away from the curb, a chariot taking him to another life. Another woman. The silence of the penthouse descended upon her. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the frantic beating of her own heart. She walked through the cavernous rooms, her hand resting on her stomach. This child, her son, deserved more than a father who was a part-time ghost, a man living a lie. And she deserved more than to be the quiet, understanding wife slowly being erased from her own life. She stopped in front of a large, abstract painting in the hallway. To anyone else, it was just art. To her, it was a safe. With a soft touch on a specific point of the frame, a nearly invisible panel slid open, revealing a high-tech biometric scanner. She pressed her thumb against it. It glowed green, and a section of the wall beside it recessed and slid open, revealing not a vault of jewels, but a hidden office. This was her real world. Sleek dark wood, a bank of monitors displaying complex market data, and encrypted communications, and a single elegant desk. This was the command center for C.D. Holdings, the private equity firm she had built in secret with the proceeds from her patent sale. While Robert was busy managing the old world empire he had inherited, Catherine had been quietly conquering the new world of tech and biotech, multiplying her initial fortune into an empire that, unbeknownst to him, could swallow Beaumont Industries whole. She had kept it a secret initially out of a desire for privacy and later out of a gut-wrenching premonition. She saw the way Robert's ego consumed everything around him. He couldn't bear to be outshone. If he knew the true scale of her wealth and influence, he would have tried to control it, to absorb it into his own narrative. Her silence had become her shield. Now she realized it was about to become her sword. She sat down, her body heavy with her pregnancy, but her mind sharp and clear. The algorithm of his deceit needed to be fully exposed. The time for quiet hope was over. It was time for data, for facts, for a plan. Her fingers, usually gliding over code, now moved to a different keyboard. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was the CEO of her own life, and a hostile takeover was in order. She typed a name into a secure search field, a name she had overheard him whisper on the phone one night when he thought she was asleep. Penelope Reed. The search results painted a quick, clear picture, a socialite, a model, a woman known for gracing the arms of powerful men. Her social media was a curated gallery of luxury yachts, exclusive resorts, and designer clothes. Catherine's jaw tightened. It wasn't just an affair. It was a public statement. Robert wasn't just cheating. He was replacing her with a newer, shinier model in the most cliché way imaginable. The pain was a sharp physical blow, but beneath it, something else was hardening resolve. She pulled up the guest list for tonight's gala. There she was, Penelope Reed, seated at Robert's table. Table 1. The seat of honor. The seat that should have been hers. He hadn't just asked her to stay home for her health. He had exiled her so he could crown his queen for the night. The disrespect was so profound, so utterly arrogant, it stole her breath. She leaned back, a slow, cold fury washing over her. Robert had made a critical error. He had mistaken her quietness for weakness. He saw her as a domestic dependent creature, a fragile vessel for his heir. He had forgotten the woman he married, the analyst, the strategist, the builder of empires. He thought she was sitting at home barefoot and pregnant. He had no idea she was sitting in a command center with the resources to track his every move, unravel his every lie, and dismantle his entire world. The gala was his stage. He intended to be the star. Catherine looked at the monitors at the digital ghost of her husband's secret life, and a new plan began to form. He wanted a show. She would give him a show. A grand finale he would never forget. The next few hours were a blur of focused intensity. Catherine operated not with the frantic energy of a scorned woman, but with the cold, methodical precision of a CEO executing a critical operation. The first step was to confirm the narrative she was building to replace suspicion with irrefutable proof. She engaged a discreet private investigation firm she kept on retainer for corporate due diligence through CD Holdings. Their reputation for speed and invisibility was legendary, and their price tag was astronomical. To Catherine, it was a rounding error. Her instructions, sent via an encrypted channel, were simple and direct. Full surveillance on Robert Beaumont and Penelope Reed. I want a complete dossier. Financial transactions, communication records, travel manifests, everything. I need it in 4 hours. The response was immediate. Consider it done, Ms. Davenport. They used her maiden name, the name under which she had built her empire. It felt right. It felt like her own. While the investigators went to work, Catherine began her own dig. Robert, in his arrogance, had linked some of his personal accounts to their shared home network. He assumed she would never have the skill or the audacity to look. He was wrong on both counts. Within minutes, she had bypassed his flimsy security protocols and was inside his personal cloud storage. It was a digital treasure trove of his betrayal. Photos of him and Penelope in Cabo, their arms around each other on a private beach, the sun setting behind them. Photos from a ski trip in Aspen. Penelope wearing a Beaumont Industries ski jacket, a smug smile on her face. It was a complete, parallel life he had been living, funded by the company his family had built, and which she, as his wife, was technically part owner of. Then she found the receipts. The first was from a high-end jeweler, Van Cleef and Arpels. The purchase, the Galaxy diamond necklace. The price tag had 6 zeros. The delivery address was a luxury condo downtown, an address that did not belong to them. A quick property search confirmed the owner, Penelope Reed. The condo had been purchased 3 months ago by a shell corporation, a corporation Catherine's financial software quickly traced back to a subsidiary of Beaumont Industries. He hadn't just bought his mistress a necklace. He'd bought her a home using company funds. This was no longer just infidelity. This was embezzlement. The second receipt was from a bespoke Italian tailor, a custom-made tuxedo for Robert. The notes specified a rush order to be ready for the Beaumont Foundation Gala. He had been planning this night, his grand debut, with Penelope for weeks. The thought that he had been meticulously crafting his betrayal while simultaneously feigning concern for her and their unborn child sent a wave of nausea through her. She pushed the sickness down, replacing it with icy determination. Emotion was a liability. Data was power. The dossier from the investigation firm arrived precisely on time. It was even more damning than she could have imagined. It contained flight manifests showing Robert and Penelope had traveled together on the Beaumont corporate jet more than a dozen times in the last 6 months. Hotel folios billed to a corporate expense account. Encrypted text messages, which the firm's expert hackers had decrypted, laid their entire affair bare. The messages were a nauseating mix of lust and condescension. Robert, can't wait to have you on my arm tonight. The whole city will see you for who you are. The future Mrs. Beaumont. Penelope. And what about the current one? Is she safely locked away in her tower? Robert, don't worry about Catherine. She's content playing house. She has no idea how the real world works. She'll be fine. A generous settlement will keep her comfortable. A generous settlement. The words echoed in her mind. He was already planning her dismissal, her quiet removal from the life she had helped him build. He spoke of her as if she were a piece of furniture, an outdated model to be stored away. He truly had no idea who he was married to. The sheer depth of his underestimation was, in a strange way, a gift. It was the vulnerability she was about to exploit. The final piece of the dossier was the most critical. It was a summary of Robert's recent financial activities within Beaumont Industries. Her investigators, cross-referencing with their own financial intelligence, had uncovered a pattern of highly leveraged, risky investments and the shuffling of funds into offshore accounts. He was bleeding the company dry to fund his lavish lifestyle and prop up his image. The Beaumont empire wasn't as stable as it appeared. It was a house of cards, and Robert was a reckless gambler, betting it all on his own ego. Catherine printed the most damning documents: the receipt for the necklace, the deed to the condo, the incriminating text messages, and a concise summary of his financial malfeasance. She placed them in a sleek leather portfolio. These were not just pieces of paper, they were weapons. Her phone buzzed. It was Fiona, her fiercely loyal executive assistant at CD Holdings. "Everything is in motion, Catherine," Fiona's calm voice said through the speaker. "The flight crew is on standby. The ground team at the gala venue is in place. Your wardrobe and security detail are en route to you now." "Thank you, Fiona. You're a lifesaver." "He's not going to know what hit him," Fiona said, a rare hint of relish in her voice. She was one of the few people who knew about Catherine's marriage and had watched with quiet disapproval as Robert's public persona grew more arrogant. "He thinks he's the king of the world tonight," Catherine said, looking out the window at the glittering city. "He's about to find out his kingdom is smaller than he thinks, much, much smaller." As if on cue, a team arrived. A stylist she trusted implicitly, a makeup artist, and 2 members of her personal security team, ex-special forces, discreet and formidable. They moved with quiet efficiency, transforming her living room into a prep station. The stylist unveiled a gown that was the antithesis of everything Penelope Reed represented. It was not flashy or revealing. It was a custom-made creation in a deep midnight blue silk that draped over her pregnant form with regal elegance. It was sophisticated, powerful, and utterly commanding. It was the dress of a queen, not a mistress. She wore no necklace, leaving her décolletage bare. Her only jewelry was her original engagement ring and wedding band, symbols of vows that had been broken, and a pair of simple, elegant diamond stud earrings. Her statement piece would not be something she wore. It would be how she arrived. As the makeup artist worked, Catherine reviewed the final part of her plan. It was a list of names. The key members of the Beaumont Industries Board of Directors, major investors, and the city's most influential media figures. All of them were at the gala tonight. Her audience. The time for hiding was over. The time for quiet suffering was over. Robert had built his identity on the Beaumont name, on the illusion of power and success. She was about to introduce him to a new kind of power, real self-made, and utterly unassailable. He had written her out of his story for the evening. She was about to write herself into his as the final devastating chapter. To understand the sheer magnitude of the tidal wave that was about to hit Robert Beaumont, one had to understand the secret life of Catherine Davenport. It was a life lived in parallel, a silent, growing force hidden behind the facade of a supportive, unassuming wife. It began 10 years ago in a cramped dorm room surrounded by empty coffee cups and textbooks on algorithmic theory. Catherine, then a prodigious university student, wasn't just studying code. She was reinventing it. She developed a groundbreaking predictive analytics engine, an algorithm so sophisticated it could forecast market fluctuations with an astonishing 94% accuracy. She called it Cassandra. She knew what she had. Instead of selling it to a tech giant, where it would be absorbed and rebranded, she patented it and licensed its use through a carefully structured deal. The deal was complex, ensuring her a small percentage of every transaction that utilized her code. It was a quiet, passive stream of income. But the world of high-frequency trading was anything but quiet. Within 2 years, that small stream had become a raging river of capital. While her friends were celebrating their first entry-level jobs, Catherine at 23 was a multimillionaire. But she lived like a student. She drove a modest car, lived in a simple apartment, and continued her studies. Wealth to her was not a means for extravagance. It was a tool for creation. This was when she founded CD Holdings. CD for Catherine Davenport. It was her ghost company, an entity with no public face registered through a series of international holding structures that made its true ownership nearly untraceable to a casual observer. Her first move was not to buy a yacht or a mansion, but to hire a team of the smartest, hungriest financial analysts, lawyers, and strategists she could find. She paid them obscenely well and demanded absolute loyalty and discretion. Her philosophy was simple: invest in the future, not in fads. While other firms were chasing fleeting trends, CD Holdings was pouring capital into fledgling biotech firms on the verge of curing rare diseases into renewable energy technologies that were still 10 years from being commercially viable, and into AI-driven logistics platforms that would one day make traditional shipping methods obsolete. It was during this time that she met Robert Beaumont. He was captivated by her sharp mind, but he saw it as a charming accessory, not a weapon. He heard she'd done well with a small tech patent, and he mentally filed it away as a cute success story, a pittance compared to the generational wealth of the Beaumont empire. He had no concept of the scale she operated on. When they married, she didn't merge her life with his. She simply built a firewall between her two worlds. The penthouse she shared with Robert was a stage set. Her real office, the hidden nerve center behind the painting, was where she truly lived her professional life. In the early mornings before Robert woke, she would be in there conducting video calls with her teams in Zurich and Hong Kong. Late at night, after he fell asleep, she'd be analyzing quarterly reports from a gene sequencing startup her firm had backed. Her company, CD Holdings, had grown into a behemoth. It had a controlling interest in over 30 companies across 3 continents. Its private valuation was a carefully guarded secret, but the analysts who worked for her knew the truth. CD Holdings was worth conservatively 3 times the total value of Beaumont Industries. Catherine wielded her power with a surgeon's precision. She never sought the spotlight. There were no magazine profiles, no public announcements. Her influence was felt in boardrooms, in sudden stock shifts, in the surprise acquisition of a rival company. In the world of high finance, CD Holdings was spoken of, in hushed, mythical tones, a ghost fund, with an uncanny ability to see the future. No one knew it was run by a woman the world saw only as Robert Beaumont's quiet, intelligent wife. This secrecy was at first a preference. Now it was her strategic advantage. Robert's world was built on public perception, on the Beaumont name, on the illusion of unassailable strength. He paraded his wealth. He put his name on buildings. Catherine's power was the opposite. It was invisible, silent, and therefore completely underestimated. As she prepared for the gala, she made a series of calls from her hidden office, her voice calm and authoritative. Fiona, liquidate our position in Omnicorp and begin a phased acquisition of shares in Phoenix Logistics. Use the Raptor Fund. I want a 5% stake by morning. Phoenix was Beaumont Industries' biggest competitor. Initiate the Storm Protocol. I want the full opposition research file on every member of the Beaumont board compiled and ready for distribution. I need leverage points on each of them. Financial, personal, everything. Contact Antoine. Tell him I need him and his team at the gala. I want high-definition footage of everything, especially the board members' reactions. This needs to be documented. Antoine was a former investigative journalist who now ran her corporate media strategy team. Each command was a chess piece moving into position. Robert thought he was playing checkers, moving his king and queen around for show. Catherine was playing a three-dimensional game he didn't even know existed. Her greatest asset was not just her money, but her information network. The Cassandra algorithm had evolved. It now scraped and analyzed not just financial data, but global news, social media trends, and private intelligence reports, giving her a real-time predictive map of the corporate world. It had flagged the instability in Beaumont Industries months ago. It had shown her Robert's reckless spending, his siphoning of company funds. She had known he was a problem long before she knew about Penelope. The affair was not the disease. It was merely a symptom of the deep-seated rot of his ego and arrogance. She looked at a live satellite image on one of her screens. It showed a sleek silver Gulfstream G650 sitting on a private runway just outside the city. Her jet, the Odyssey. It was a flying office equipped with the same secure communication technology as her command center. Robert knew she had access to a private jet through her family inheritance, as he thought of it, but he imagined it was some small chartered plane she used occasionally. He had never seen the Odyssey. He had no idea it was a symbol of her true autonomy. Tonight, the Odyssey would not be just a mode of transport. It would be a declaration of independence, a declaration of power. The stylist put the finishing touches on her hair, a simple but elegant chignon. The makeup artist gave a final nod. Catherine stood up, the midnight blue silk flowing around her. She was no longer just Catherine Beaumont, the wronged wife. She was Catherine Davenport, the founder and CEO of CD Holdings, a self-made billionaire, a silent titan of industry. She walked out of her hidden office, the wall sliding shut behind her, sealing her secret world. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the strong, steady kick of her son. This was for him, to show him that his mother was not a victim. She was a force of nature. Robert had wanted her to stay home, to be small, to be invisible. But a storm was not something you could lock in a penthouse. A storm was coming for the Beaumont Foundation Gala, and it was about to make landfall. The Beaumont Foundation Gala was in full swing. Held in the grand ballroom of the city's most historic hotel, it was an exercise in performative philanthropy. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, cast a golden glow over the 1,000 or so guests. The clinking of champagne glasses and the murmur of polite, strategic conversation formed the evening soundtrack. At the center of it all, Robert Beaumont held court. He was in his element, moving through the crowd with an easy confidence, a hand on a senator's back, here, a shared laugh with a banking CEO there. He was a master of the room, and the room was the epicenter of the city's power structure. And on his arm, a vision in crimson, was Penelope Reed. Her dress was a daring, figure-hugging sheath of red silk that left little to the imagination. Around her neck, the galaxy diamond necklace glittered malevolently, catching the light and the envious stares of everyone it passed. She was a beacon of defiance, a walking, talking trophy of Robert's conquest. "Robert, darling," a portly real estate developer boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Daring of you, I must say. Where's Catherine tonight? Feeling under the weather?" Robert smiled, a smooth, practiced expression of concern. "The pregnancy has been a bit taxing on her," he said, his voice laced with false sympathy. "The doctor's orders were strict, complete rest. She was heartbroken to miss it, of course, but the baby's health comes first." Penelope, standing beside him, offered a small, demure smile. "It's so important to be careful at that stage," she added, her voice dripping with insincerity. Her hand tightened on Robert's arm, a subtle act of possession. The lie was so effortless, so convincing, that the developer nodded in understanding. Of course. Family first. Well, you're doing a fine job of representing the Beaumont name tonight." His eyes flickered to Penelope and the diamonds, and a knowing smirk played on his lips. This was the narrative Robert was carefully crafting, the dutiful husband forced to attend his own gala without his ailing pregnant wife, accompanied by a close friend to keep his spirits up. It was a flimsy, transparent lie, but in a room built on such deceptions, it was accepted with a nod and a wink. He was getting away with it, and he was reveling in the audacity of it all. His confidence swelled with every handshake, every toast. He felt invincible. Catherine was at home, isolated in their glass tower, probably watching some mindless television show, blissfully unaware. He had successfully managed his two worlds, keeping them perfectly separate. Tonight was a celebration of that success. Gregory Roberts' longtime friend and a senior VP at Beaumont Industries pulled him aside near the Raw bar. "Rob, are you sure about this?" he murmured, his eyes darting nervously towards Penelope. "This is bold. The board members are all here. They're noticing." Robert waved a dismissive hand. "Gregory, relax. It's the 21st century. People have affairs. Besides, Penelope is good for the brand. She's vibrant, exciting. She gets people talking. She's not your wife." Gregory countered, his tone serious. "Catherine is respected. She's class. This..." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at Penelope, who was now taking a selfie with a B-list actor. "This is a liability. Catherine is yesterday's news," Robert said, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "She's become domestic, predictable. This company, this life, it needs forward momentum. It needs passion. I'm making a change. The board will come around once they see the benefits." Gregory looked at his friend, truly seeing the depth of his delusion for the first time. Robert had surrounded himself with yes-men for so long that he had lost touch with reality. He genuinely believed his own hype. "Be careful, Rob," Gregory warned. "Hubris is a hell of a thing." Robert just laughed, a rich, confident sound that echoed his self-assurance. He clapped Gregory on the back and moved on, leaving his friend shaking his head. The culmination of the evening was to be Robert's keynote speech, A 10-minute address celebrating the Foundation's charitable work, but more importantly, cementing his own image as a benevolent corporate leader, a pillar of the community. As the Master of Ceremonies began the introduction, Robert gave Penelope's hand a final squeeze. "Wish me luck," he whispered. "You don't need it," she purred back. "You own them. You own this whole city." He walked towards the stage, the applause washing over him like a warm tide. He felt a surge of pure power. He looked out at the sea of faces, the powerful, the wealthy, the influential, all looking up at him. His world in perfect order. His mistress at his table, his wife at home, his empire at his feet. He stepped up to the podium and tapped the microphone. Thank you," he began, his voice resonating through the ballroom. "It's an honor to welcome you all here tonight to celebrate the work of the Beaumont Foundation." Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Catherine was making her final preparations. She stood at the steps of the Odyssey, her security detail forming a discreet perimeter. The jet's engines hummed with a low, powerful thrum. Inside, Fiona was on a secure video call from the command center. "We're patched into the hotel's security feed. He's on stage now," she reported. "Antoine's team is in position. All assets are green. Are you ready?" Catherine took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. She looked up at the silver fuselage of her jet, a machine built for speed, power, and purpose. It was a reflection of herself. She felt a profound and sudden calm. The fear and hurt had been burned away, leaving only a core of unshakable resolve. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "Tell the pilot to begin our final approach. And Fiona." "Yes." "Patch the air traffic control communications for the heliport into the ballroom's sound system. I want them to hear me coming." A slow smile spread across Fiona's face. "Consider it done. Godspeed, Catherine." Catherine nodded and ascended the stairs into the luxurious cabin of the jet. She sat in a plush leather seat and fastened her belt. Through the window she could see the city lights spread out below her, like a carpet of scattered diamonds. Diamonds, far more brilliant than the ones dangling from Penelope Reed's neck. Robert was giving a speech about the Beaumont legacy. She was about to give him a lesson in her own. The jet began to move, accelerating down the runway, a silver bullet aimed at the heart of her husband's gilded world. Robert was hitting his stride. The speech was a masterpiece of corporate rhetoric, filled with words like legacy, community, and future, all delivered with his signature blend of humility and authority. He spoke of building bridges, not walls, and of the responsibility that came with great fortune. The irony was lost on him, but not on the few like Gregory, who watched with growing unease. "And so as we look to the next decade," Robert continued, his voice swelling with practiced passion, "Beaumont Industries is not just investing in commerce, but in character. We are building a future, not just for our shareholders, but for our children." It was at that moment that a strange sound began to bleed through the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system. At first, it was just a faint, crackling static. A sound technician at the back of the room frowned, tapping his console. Then a voice, crisp and professional, cut through the static, overriding Robert's speech. "To Odyssey, you are cleared for final approach to the Grand Hotel heliport. Wind is calm. You are clear to land." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. Heads turned. Robert paused, his brow furrowing in annoyance. He shot a glare at the sound booth. "If we could get that sorted out," he said into the mic, forcing a smile. The technician was frantically trying to kill the feed, but it was being piped in from an external encrypted source he couldn't override. Another voice, this one, female, smooth as silk, and utterly calm, responded over the speakers. "Roger that, tower. Odyssey is on final approach. ETA 2 minutes." The murmuring grew louder. The Grand Hotel had a rooftop heliport, but it was reserved for emergencies and the occasional head of state. Who in the world was arriving by private aircraft in the middle of their gala? Robert tried to regain control. "As I was saying," he started, but his voice was drowned out by a low, powerful thrumming that began to vibrate through the entire building. It was a deep, resonant hum that grew steadily in volume, the unmistakable sound of powerful jet engines, not the whump-whump of a helicopter. A jet. It was impossible. No jet could land on a rooftop helipad, unless it was a VTOL, a vertical takeoff and landing jet, a piece of military-grade technology so rare and expensive in the civilian world as to be almost mythical. The vibration intensified. Crystal glasses on the tables began to tremble. Every eye in the room was now wide, looking up at the ceiling as if expecting it to crack open. Robert's speech was forgotten. His composure was cracking. What was happening? This was his night, his stage. Outside the Odyssey, a custom-modified marvel of aeronautical engineering was executing a perfect computer-assisted vertical descent. Its powerful engines pivoted, directing their thrust downwards, holding the sleek silver jet in a perfect controlled hover before it settled onto the reinforced helipad with a gentle sigh of hydraulics. Inside the ballroom, the doors at the far end swung open. 2 men in sharp dark suits, Catherine's security detail, entered and took up positions, their presence professional and intimidating. The crowd fell into a stunned silence, and then she appeared. Catherine Beaumont walked into the ballroom as if she owned it. The midnight blue silk of her gown flowed around her, a river of elegance. Her pregnancy was not a vulnerability, but a statement of regal maternal power. Her face was serene, her eyes clear and focused. She projected an aura of such absolute, unshakable authority that the air in the room seemed to crackle around her. She didn't look at the crowd. Her gaze was locked on one person, her husband, standing frozen on the stage, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. The silence was broken by a collective gasp. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Is that Catherine? I thought she was sick. My God, did she just arrive in that thing flaunted? Look at her. She looks incredible." Penelope Reed at table 1 shrank in her chair. The crimson of her dress suddenly seemed garish, her diamonds tawdry. She was a cheap imitation, standing in the presence of the genuine article. She looked from Catherine to Robert and back again, her face pale with shock and sudden gut-wrenching fear. Catherine walked slowly, deliberately down the central aisle. Her path was a straight line to the stage. People didn't just get out of her way. They seemed to press back, creating a wide corridor for her, as if acknowledging the passage of true power. She stopped at the foot of the stage, looking up at Robert. The entire room held its breath. This was a confrontation of epic proportions, a public spectacle beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Robert finally found his voice, a strained, choked whisper into the microphone. "Catherine, what are you doing here? I told you to rest." Catherine's lips curved into a small, cold smile. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words, calm and precise, carried across the silent room. "You're right, Robert," she said, her voice like chips of ice. "You did tell me to rest. You also told me you were going to a board meeting in Geneva last month, but your corporate jet's flight plan, which I have a copy of, says you were in a private villa in Lake Como." She paused, letting the words land. "With her." She didn't even glance at Penelope, denying her the dignity of a direct acknowledgement. The implication was clear. Penelope wasn't a rival. She was a footnote, an insignificant detail in a much larger betrayal. Robert's face went white. He was speechless. Catherine's gaze swept over the audience, meeting the eyes of the board members, the investors, the media. "My husband speaks tonight of legacy and character." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "So let's talk about character. Let's talk about the character of a man who uses Beaumont Industries as his personal piggy bank to buy his mistress's $1 million necklaces." She held up her hand, and on a massive screen behind the stage, which was supposed to be displaying the Beaumont Foundation logo, an image suddenly appeared. It was a crystal-clear copy of the receipt for the Galaxy necklace. A wave of shocked murmurs swept the room. Or the character of a man who buys them luxury condos with company funds funneled through offshore shell corporations. The image on the screen changed to the deed of Penelope's condo, with the shell corporation's name circled in red. Robert stumbled back from the podium, his hand clutching his chest as if he'd been physically struck. "Catherine, stop. This is not the time or the place." "This is the perfect time and place," she retorted, her voice ringing with authority. "This is your stage, Robert. You invited all these people here to witness your success, so let them witness all of it." She took a step closer to the stage, her presence commanding and absolute. "You see, you all think of me as Catherine Beaumont, the wife. You've made the same mistake my husband made. You've underestimated me." She looked directly at Harold Lancaster, the most senior member of the Beaumont board. "Mr. Lancaster, you're concerned about the company's Q3 performance drop. I can tell you why it dropped. It dropped because our CEO has been leveraging company assets to cover massive losses from his personal high-risk commodities trading, while simultaneously embezzling funds to the tune of $50 million over the last year to support a lifestyle he can't actually afford." The screen behind her flickered again, now displaying a complex but damning flowchart of money transfers from Beaumont corporate accounts to a series of offshore entities. The ballroom erupted. The illusion of Beaumont power and prestige had not just been cracked, it had been atomized in a matter of minutes. Catherine let the chaos swell for a moment before she delivered the final devastating blow. "My name," she announced, her voice cutting through the noise, "is Catherine Davenport, and CD Holdings, the private equity firm that just this morning became the majority shareholder in your chief competitor, Phoenix Logistics, is my company." Checkmate. The sound in the room died instantly. All that was left was the ringing silence of total world-shattering shock. Robert Beaumont stared at his pregnant wife. This woman. He thought he knew this quiet domestic creature he had so carelessly discarded. He wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at the woman who had just destroyed him. The silence in the ballroom was a living thing, heavy and absolute. For a long-stretched moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the chandeliers. The images on the screen behind the stage, the receipts, the deeds, the money trail remained a digital testament to Robert's ruin. Robert stood on the stage, a statue of a man. The blood had drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, waxy grey. His charismatic smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of utter incomprehension. He looked at Catherine, but it was as if he was looking at a stranger, an alien being who wore his wife's face. The intricate web of lies he had so carefully woven had been torn apart with such brutal efficiency that his mind simply couldn't process it. Catherine, her part played, turned from the stage. She did not give her husband a final, scornful look. She gave him nothing. Her dismissal of him was total. She turned her attention to the board members of Beaumont Industries, who were huddled together at their table, their faces a mixture of fury, panic, and dawning realization. She walked towards them, and they watched her approach as if she were a predator. "Mr. Lancaster," she said, her voice low and even, addressing the chairman, "I trust you and the rest of the board will be calling an emergency meeting first thing in the morning. You have a CEO to remove and a criminal investigation to cooperate with." She placed the leather portfolio she had carried in on their table. "This contains everything my investigators found. I suggest you give it to the SEC before they come asking for it." Lancaster, a man in his 70s who had seen decades of corporate warfare, could only nod, his face ashen. He had been played, they had all been played by Robert's charm, and now they were facing the abyss. Catherine's gaze then fell upon Penelope Reed. The mistress was a broken figure, her bravado shattered. The diamonds around her neck, once a symbol of triumph, now felt like a slave's collar. She was trying to make herself invisible, but Catherine paused by her table. She still did not look directly at Penelope. Instead, she spoke to the air just above her head. "Those jewels and the apartment they were delivered to are assets of the Beaumont Corporation, purchased with stolen funds. Their legal team will be in touch to arrange for their recovery." She let that sink in. "I'd advise you to hire a good lawyer. You're a material witness in a major fraud case." With that, Catherine turned and walked back down the aisle, her posture erect, her pace unhurried. The crowd parted for her, once again. Their shock now mingled with a palpable sense of awe and fear. She was a force of nature that had just swept through their gilded world and rearranged it forever. As she reached the doors, the spell broke. The ballroom exploded into a pandemonium of frantic, panicked chatter. Media figures were already on their phones, dictating the story of a lifetime to their news desks. Investors were scrambling, trying to understand the implications of what they had just witnessed. Beaumont Industries stock would plummet the second the market opened. Lawsuits would fly. Reputations were being incinerated in real time. On the stage, Robert finally collapsed. Not in a faint, but he simply folded, sinking to his knees, his hands covering his face. The public humiliation was absolute. He had lost everything: his company, his reputation, his freedom, his wife, his unborn child, in the space of 10 minutes, on the very stage he had chosen for his coronation. Gregory, his face etched with a mixture of pity and disgust, was the only one who went to him. He put a hand on his friend's shaking shoulder. "It's over, Rob," he said softly. "It's all over." Catherine didn't look back. Her security team escorted her out of the ballroom and into a private elevator that took them directly to the rooftop. The Odyssey was waiting its engines, softly idling its cabin lights, a warm, welcoming glow against the dark sky. As she stepped back into her jet, the chaos of the ballroom faded away. The door hissed shut, encasing her in a cocoon of quiet and control. She sank into the soft leather seat, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself to feel. It wasn't triumph she felt, not in the way she had expected. There was no joy in Robert's destruction, only a profound and weary sadness. Sadness for the man he could have been, for the marriage they could have had. But woven through the sadness was a thread of steel, the fierce, liberating clarity of her own strength. She had not acted out of revenge. She had acted out of necessity. To protect herself, to protect her company, and most of all to protect the future of the child growing inside her. She had severed the diseased limb to save the body. The jet lifted off the roof, rising smoothly into the night sky. Below her, the Grand Hotel was a hive of activity, flashing lights from news vans and police cars beginning to arrive. She was leaving that world behind a world of lies and performance and fragile egos. She keyed in a command on the console beside her chair, and a video screen lit up. It was Fiona back at the command center. "It's done," Catherine said, her voice tired but firm. Fiona's face was filled with admiration. "The news is already breaking. Beaumont, CEO, accused of massive fraud by heiress wife in Gala showdown. They're calling you the Phantom CEO. They're all scrambling to figure out who Catherine Davenport is." "They'll know soon enough," Catherine said. "Let's prepare the official press release for CD Holdings for the morning. It's time to step out of the shadows." She ended the call and looked out the window as the jet banked, turning towards her private estate in the countryside, a sanctuary of peace and privacy far from the city's glare. She placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked a small, reassuring thump. She was not just Catherine Beaumont or Catherine Davenport anymore. She was a mother, a creator, a survivor. She had faced the greatest betrayal of her life, not by crumbling, but by rising. She had taken the ashes of her marriage, and from them, she was building an empire for her son. The night was over, but her new day, their new day, was just beginning. 6 months later, the world was a different place. The name Beaumont was now synonymous with scandal. Robert, convicted of massive fraud based on Catherine's irrefutable evidence, was serving a 15-year prison sentence. His empire, Beaumont Industries, had crumbled into bankruptcy, its most valuable assets absorbed by Phoenix Logistics, a company now wholly owned by Catherine. Penelope Reed, after returning the diamonds and testifying against her former lover, had vanished into obscurity, a footnote in a story that was now legendary. Catherine Davenport, however, was just beginning. She had stepped out of the shadows, rebranding her vast holdings as Davenport International. The Phantom CEO was a phantom no more, but an icon of resilience whose story was a masterclass in strategy. Her new headquarters was not a sterile city skyscraper, but a sleek, sun-drenched campus built in harmony with the rolling hills surrounding it. It was here in her corner office that she now divided her attention between quarterly reports and the soft coos of her 4-month-old son Nicholas, who rested peacefully in a bassinet beside her desk. He was the center of her new universe, the why behind every decision. Her assistant Fiona entered quietly, holding a tablet. "It's done," she said softly. "The divorce is finalized. You're solely Catherine Davenport now." Catherine nodded, a quiet sense of closure washing over her as she looked at her son. The last tie to her old life was finally cleanly severed. "Thank you, Fiona, for everything." After Fiona left, Catherine lifted Nicholas into her arms, his small head resting against her shoulder. She walked to the large window overlooking the campus, where her employees, the world's brightest minds in tech and biotech, collaborated below. This was the empire she had built, one of integrity and innovation, not of ego and greed. For a moment she thought of Robert, not with anger, but with a distant pity for a man who measured his worth by what he could possess. He never understood that true power lay not in what you owned, but in what you could create. He had wanted to conquer a world she was now quietly helping to build. Nicholas gurgled, his tiny hand wrapping securely around her finger. Catherine looked down at him, her heart filled with a fierce, protective love. He would grow up knowing his mother's strength, and that his name, Davenport, stood for resilience. The storm had passed, clearing the ground for something better to grow. Holding her son, Catherine looked out at the horizon, not at the ashes of the past, but toward the bright, limitless promise of their future. Catherine's story, is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can sometimes become the catalyst for our greatest transformations. It's a testament to the fact that true strength isn't about the absence of pain, but about how we rise from it. She was underestimated, dismissed, and cast aside, but she never lost sight of her own worth. Instead of allowing herself to be a victim in someone else's drama, she became the master of her own destiny, reminding us all that the most formidable power is the power you build for yourself in silence, with intelligence and unbreakable will. If Catherine's story of strength and rebirth resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of turning adversity into triumph, please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know you enjoyed it. Share this video with someone who might need to hear a story of resilience, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more drama stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support allows us to keep bringing these narratives to life. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.